All right, let's get right into it. If you're looking to land a React job in 2025, it's not about knowing every single thing, it's about knowing the right things. Over the next few minutes, we're going to lay out a super clear, actionable roadmap that's based on what companies are actually looking for in interviews. Let's do this.
Let's just start with the single most important rule, right here. And look, I'm not exaggerating. For most companies, this is the very first filter. Why? Well, because hooks are the absolute heart of modern React. If you can't show that you really truly get them, your resume probably won't even make it past that initial tech screen. So how do you prove you're not just a beginner, that you're actually ready for a professional role? Well, this is the roadmap that's going to get you there. We've broken it down into 3 acts, taking you from the absolute core of React all the way to the pro-level skills that are going to get you hired.
So let's dive into Act 1, Mastering React Score Engine. You have to think of these as the total non-negotiables. Everything else we talk about today, it's all built right on top of this foundation.
So what exactly are hooks? I mean, at their core, they're just functions, right? They let you hook into React's internal workings, like state and lifecycle stuff, but from your functional components. An interviewer, they don't just want you to recite a definition. They want to see that you get it, that this is the modern way to build reusable stateful logic without ever touching a class.
And you got to think of this as a progression, right? You start with useState. That's for managing your components' data. Then you move on to useEffect, which is for anything that happens outside the normal render, like fetching data from an API. And by the way, mastering that dependency array, that's a classic interview question that trips a lot of people up. From there, useRef lets you talk directly to the DOM. Then you start thinking about performance with useMemo and useCallback. But here's the real kicker. Building your own custom hooks. That shows an employer that you can think abstractly and write code that's genuinely reusable. That's a huge green flag.
Okay, so once you've got a solid grip on how state works inside a single component, the next logical question is, how do all those components fit together? And this isn't just about making your app look nice. It's about writing code that someone else can actually understand and build upon 6 months from now.
Being able to talk about these patterns it's absolutely crucial. For instance, can you explain the difference between a smart component that fetches data and a dumb one that just displays it? Or can you describe how you'd solve prop drilling by lifting state up? Answering those kinds of questions proves you're thinking about building a whole, scalable application, not just a handful of disconnected components.
All right, let's level up. Welcome to Act 2. Now that we have the building blocks, we can start putting them together to build the kinds of complex, interactive apps you'll actually be working on in a real job.
So, you know how it is. Your app starts small, but then it grows. And suddenly you're passing props down through like 10 layers of components. It's a mess, right? That's where global state management comes in. It's the solution for handling data that needs to be everywhere, like who the current user is or what's in their shopping cart.
So here's the lay of the land for 2025. You've got React's built-in context API, which is great for simple stuff. Then there's Zustand, which is super popular right now. It's lightweight, it's fast, and it's trending for a reason. But if you're aiming for a big company or an enterprise-level app, you are almost guaranteed to run into Redux Toolkit. Now, you don't have to be a master of all 3, but you absolutely need to be able to explain the pros and cons and justify which one you'd pick for a specific project.
Okay, so managing your data is half the battle, but what about managing the user's journey through the app? How do they get from the home page to their profile or to a specific product page? Well, that is the job of a router.
You absolutely have to know your way around a library like React Router. An interviewer is going to expect you to know how to set up dynamic routes, for pages like product/123. They'll want to know how you protected dashboard so only logged-in users can get to it. And they'll probably ask about lazy loading routes to make the app load faster. These aren't edge cases. This is the day-to-day work of building a multi-page application.
Let's be real. Almost every app you build is going to have forms. In React, there are 2 main ways to think about them. With controlled components, your React state is the one and only source of truth. With uncontrolled components, you kind of let the browser's DOM do its thing. You need to know the difference, but you also really need to be ready to talk about why for anything even slightly complex, a library like React Hook Form is pretty much the gold standard now for both performance and validation.
Okay, I want you to stop and really listen to this next part, because it is a total game changer. For years, we all just managed API data with useEffect and useState. In 2025, that's just not good enough anymore. Knowing a server state library like TanStack Query, you might know it as React Query, is now a core expectation, period.
So why is this such a big deal? Well, think about it. It solves like a dozen problems you'd normally have to code yourself. It just handles caching, so you're not constantly refetching the same data. It makes updating data on the server a breeze. And it gives you these amazing tools for better user experiences, like optimistic updates. That's where the UI changes instantly, even before the server confirms it. This is the kind of stuff that makes you look like a pro.
And that brings us to the final act, the professional developer's edge. Look, mastering Acts 1 and 2 will get you the interview. Mastering this act, this is what's going to get you the job offer.
This is probably one of the most common and most revealing interview questions for a mid-level or senior role. So I'm going to ask you right now, what actually causes a React component to re-render? The answer to this is what separates people who just use React from the people who truly understand it.
Okay, so here's the breakdown. It all kicks off when state or props change. First, React snaps a picture of the UI in its memory. That's the virtual DOM. Then it runs this clever diffing algorithm to compare the new picture with the old one, and it figures out the absolute minimum that has changed. Finally, it goes and patches the real live DOM with only those tiny changes. Understanding this process is how you find and fix performance problems and know exactly when to use a tool like React.memo.
All right, time for a little tough love for 2025. Learning React is awesome. It's the foundation. But a huge chunk of the best, highest-paying React jobs out there, they're actually Next.js jobs. Next.js is a framework that's built on top of React, and it just gives you a ton of superpowers right out of the box.
If you want to be competitive today, you have to get your head around the big shift in the Next.js app router. It all comes down to understanding server components versus client components. Server components run on the server, they're amazing for fetching data. Client components run in the browser, and they handle all the user interaction. This isn't just a small feature, it completely changes how you think about building your app, where your code runs, and how you make things fast. And finally, let's talk about the things that don't always show up on the job description, but make a huge difference. These are the skills that signal you're a mature, reliable engineer. Can you write tests for your components with something like Vitest or React Testing Library? And are you a wizard with the React dev tools, able to hunt down bugs and performance issues? These things show you're a professional who's going to save the team a lot of time and headaches.
Okay, so you've done all that. You've mastered the core stuff. You want to go from a great candidate to an absolute no-brainer hire? Here are the bonus topics that will push you right over the edge.
Knowing suspense, that shows you care about what the user sees while data is loading. Understanding bundlers like Vite, that shows you get the whole picture of how your code gets to the browser. Implementing authentication, that proves you can handle security, which is critical. And actually deploying an app shows you can see a project through from start to finish. Each one of these proves you're not just a coder, you're a well-rounded developer.
And there you have it. That's the roadmap for 2025. We've walked through the core engine, the tools you need to build real applications, and the professional skills that will truly set you apart. The path is right there in front of you. The only question left is, are you ready to start building?